Take 107. I am back in Dungeon Draft again this week, and we're trying something a bit new. We're going to try to recreate Bleak Falls Barrow in Dungeon Draft. So I will have to take some liberties with how I fit it on the screen. I'm sure you'll understand. This is a 1920 by 1080 map, grid-based, obviously, and I'm going to have to swap the sides, like the stairwell that's the little winding circular stairwell right before you fight the spider. I'm going to have to put that on the opposite side and stuff like that. And really, I'm only going to do the first level of the dungeon. I may do the rest of it in a later video, and maybe try to recreate other dungeons that we know and love from well-known video games and stuff like that. That might be fun. It might be a fun way to spice up things on the channel at the moment and give me some ideas for content. And you know, if you're a dungeon master out there and you're watching this, then maybe you could surprise your players with this dungeon and see how long it takes them to notice, if they notice at all. Yeah, so it's going to be fun. We're going to just play it by ear, and again, I'm going to ramble, just like I did last time. So if that's not your thing, I totally understand. I kind of like watching these back, especially, I speed them up by 4 times, and so I actually look like I know what I'm doing, which is cool to see happen. I don't know if you guys are like me. I love watching sketch artists and digital artists do time-lapse videos and how easy everything looks, you know, and in reality, we all know that the entire process is so much more drawn out than the way it appears, but this took about an hour and a half to do, and again, sped up by 4 times. It's about, I think it came out to roughly 14 minutes. I may take a bit of time to talk a little bit about sort of my approach to this sort of thing, because I think people who may be just starting out in Dungeon Draft, I mean, it's really easy to make really good looking maps, but it's also, sometimes you can get discouraged because your maps don't look like the pictures in, you know, the demo videos and other people who are making these types of things. And I'll talk about maybe sort of what my approach is to getting maps to look the way I want them to, because I've played around with this quite a bit at this point. I spoke last time about lighting, and like any real art, I think, real quote-unquote art, I think lighting and shading and all of that really is where the sort of, you know, the meat and potatoes of this entire thing is. It really makes the scene, and, you know, right now I always start with the clutter, you know, and sort of mapping out where things are. But even if it begins to look kind of crappy, because there's a certain point, I think, especially in the first room of this dungeon, where when I was making it, I was like, wow, this looks like crap. But the lighting can take care of a lot of the issues you're seeing later. There's a lot of contrasting colors going on at the moment. Don't worry about that. If you're just starting out with Dungeon Draft, don't worry about the clashing styles and if everything looks cohesive or anything. The lighting can take care of that later. I mean, trust me, like, it can make or break your entire map. So just be creative when you're creating these areas, and drop a ton of objects like I'm doing here. You know, I'm doing snow at the moment. You can see, because that first room in Bleak Falls Barrow has a big open portion in the ceiling. The outer doors is taking over, I think, the left portion of the room, and we'll have the lighting reflect that once we get to that at the, you know, the last few minutes of this video. I mean, even now you can see it looks a bit garbled. It looks a bit like there's just too much going on. But again, when we get to the lighting portion where we can sort of make everything a uniform color, or a uniform tone, I think that's the proper term, then it will make everything look like it's supposed to, like everything goes together. That's the beauty of this software, is you don't have to be an artist or a concept artist or, you know, anything like that to make really cool looking maps. Anybody can do it. This is all done by memory, so it will not be a perfect replication of Bleak Falls Barrow. Again, taking liberties. And I think we've all done, or at least a lot of us have done, that dungeon quite enough to at least have a general sense of how it goes. And, it's good pacing even for a tabletop role-playing game, I think. The dungeon is well built. You could have easily some interesting encounters in this main room, this first chamber that we're in, and you could also build one in the lever room that we'll get to here later. All in all, I think it could be a pretty fun low-level dungeon if you're just getting started. For one thing, if you're a dungeon master and you haven't done this a lot, maybe having something that you're a little more familiar with is just what you need, and kudos to you if your players haven't played Skyrim, but yeah, I think, it's intimidating for a lot of people, who want to play Dungeons and Dragons but don't have a dungeon master. Typically that's the person that ends up becoming the dungeon master. And it's intimidating because you feel like you have to know all the rules, you have to, have the entire dungeon memorized and all of that. And on some level, it helps to have that, but I don't think it's the end-all be-all. I've run sessions where I've completely winged it the entire time. And sometimes the most memorable moments happen that way. It's nice to plan, but it's also nice to be able to think on your toes and allow your players that sort of freedom that you can only get from a tabletop role-playing game. And so if having something familiar like a Skyrim dungeon as your first sort of foray into tabletop role-playing games helps you and assists you in getting into this wonderful world of role-playing, then more power to you. Do it. You can see there that I'm putting the circular staircase on the opposite side of the room, where the skeevers attack you, if I recall correctly. That's just because it fits on the screen better that way. And you have to get innovative. This is pretty interesting here, what I'm doing. You have to get innovative with some of the objects. There's not necessarily a good grating that I could put over this giant drop in the floor. And so I had to build it out of these wooden scaffolding pieces, or whatever these are. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. You get the general sense of what it is, and the cartoony style and everything means that not everything has to be perfectly lined up. There are some really cool assets out there for people who want something not so stylized or cartoony looking. Forgotten Adventures is sort of based on the Forgotten Realms and isometric RPGs like Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, all those sorts of games from way back when, eras bygone. And you can see I'm using multiple sarcophaguses to build the upper area of this room with the lever. But again, the lighting will take care of it, and you won't be able to tell that that's, what it is here momentarily. I think I do put a bit of wood scaffolding over it just to sort of make it look like one uniform piece. You're not limited, to my knowledge, with how many stamps you can put on the screen at a time. So there's all sorts of way to build interesting layers. And as I said last time, it's all about making something memorable. This sort of thing can really help you if you're a budding dungeon master, to sort of inform how you describe the map. Even if you're not using battle maps, for your players, maybe just having a picture. Like, I remember one of the first dungeons I ran, I just Google searched a haunted mansion. And the pictures themselves allowed me to sort of describe what was going on. And my players never caught on to that fact. It's sort of smoke and mirrors, but that's the entire gig when it comes to DMing a lot of the time. As long as you can create some sort of interesting sort of setting and keep your players in the moment, in the mood, and everything, then you're doing a fine job. So yeah, like if you're just starting out, even if you're not using maps, then use video games that have inspired you. We've all played just tons of dungeon delving games at this point. Then use one of those as influence or a reference point just while you're sort of planning out your encounters and things like that. There's so many free resources out there. Everybody thinks they've got to drop so much money on all the official guides and all of the official tools and class abilities and all this. And this is a game of imagination. And one of the first games like I ever ran, I based, the entire encounter on Bowerstone in Fable 2. So there's no reason that you can't use the things you like as sort of, it's already up in the old noggin, right? And it helps you to stay on your toes, and a lot of the times your players aren't going to catch on that. They're going to have their own images in their head when you describe things. Unless you outright say, like, yeah, it looks just like Bleak Falls Barrow, then you're fine. They're never going to know. Now we're starting to place some braziers around the room, and I'm actually using what I believe is a blacksmith pit, but I like the way they look. We got to build this little dragon stone altar here, and we have to get creative because they don't exactly have the little circular altars exactly like Skyrim. So, just something visually interesting that gives you an idea. And maybe there's some sort of puzzle to do with those 4 torches in this room. Again, you can use this as a means to create an interesting encounter. That's why I say this sort of thing is it's fun for me. It's a fun way to prepare without getting too bogged down with, all the busy work of DMing. A lot of the areas that I built off to the right-hand side of the map, I think, are actually not visible in the final product, just because I decided that the lighting, I wanted it to be a bit darker. And then I sort of black out the entire map and then only bring back lights in the place that it's strictly necessary. But I like the way it turned out, and you'll see here soon enough, placing more snow at the moment. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Again, it's all about layers. It's all about them layers. If you're using Roll20 or other software like that, this is really easy to sort of drag and drop and align with the grid in those software tools, online programs and all that sort of thing. Now we're getting into the lighting here, and you can see what I'm doing is I'm making the blue light appear. That's the natural lighting side of the room, sort of that cold exterior is entering the room here. And I like to place some of those blue lights on the snow to make it look have a little bit more depth. And you can see that just that little bit of lighting and sort of collecting those tones the way that I talked about earlier really makes the entire scene come together, whereas before it seemed a bit disjointed. And now we're going to place some torches in these rooms. These are easy. They're just corridors. These corridors are big enough that you could have a close quarters encounter there, a fight. If we're going by the grid system, it's a 15-foot room, 15-foot wide room at its widest point there. And sometimes it's fun to throw something like that at your players that sort of keeps them on their feet. If you've got a rogue that is used to doing purely ranged attacks and then all of a sudden you throw them into a close quarters battle, what do they do? That's sometimes really interesting. Again, placing more torchlight. I'm really a fan of the white light on the snow in smaller areas using the little pinpoint light because it makes it sort of appear as if it's a pile of snow. There is depth to it. It looks like there's a high point and a lower point. And now we're just placing some final little gradient lights here to make sure that everything is visible that needs to be visible. Not everything has to be, but I think it certainly helps to have some of these little details like the entrances and exits to the room specifically visible. Don't know what I'm doing there. There's a little bit of a pause. The other good thing about Dungeon Draft is it handles doorways and windows really well. It will actually cast three-dimensional shadows. Well, three-dimensional. It appears three-dimensional around corners and things like that. So it takes some of that heavy lifting work out of the way. You can see that I'm pretty happy with how that looks so far for the first level of Bleak Falls Barrow. It's pretty nice. Now we're just placing some blue lights around the darker areas. And voila! Level 1 of Bleak Falls Barrow. Pretty happy with that, all in all. It's not perfect, and There are certain little things I might do differently if I were to try it again. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. I'll probably do another video where we do the second level, where it's a little bit deeper underground. That'll be cool to do. If you have ideas for other dungeons, specific dungeons from video games that you know and love, then let me know. I'll look into them and see what I can do. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. I'm having a blast making these, so until next time.